the live version, first time ever live, with your guest host, Johnny Iron. Johnny Iron from The Iron Show. Oh, yeah. And Fringe Radio Network. That's FringeRadioNetwork.com. Here with the normal host of the show, who is always here, usually, and not me. And that is my co-host, Brian Day. What's up, man?
What's up, Johnny?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, what's going on, Johnny?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I like doing that. Oh, yeah. Welcome to Philosopher Rock. Today we're going to do the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s band Rush, which is definitely, it's my favorite band. I mean, that's all I got to say about that. It's my favorite band.
Definitely one of my favorites for sure. Not my favorite probably, but one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, yeah. Rush, yes. Led Zeppelin, Angel. I was a huge Angel fan back in the day.
Wow.
Do you remember?
I liked them, but what's his name? Punky. What was his name?
Punky Meadows. Punky Meadows.
Yeah. Yep.
You remember Punky Meadows?
Oh, yeah. Frank Zappa wrote that song about him, Punky's Whips.
Oh, yeah. I know.
But, yeah, I liked Angel. They just didn't have a whole lot to offer. They only had like 3 albums, didn't they?
Yeah, let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Oh, okay. I guess I dropped out too early.
Yeah, it was Angel, and then Hell of a Band, and then On Earth as It Is in Heaven, which that's a legend. That album is a rock legend. On Earth as It Is in Heaven. That's like, oh man, that's good stuff. And then White Hot. And then I can't remember the album after that. Oh, it's 5, I guess. Oh, and then Live Without a Net. So 6, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they've got a new album out now. And
cool.
God, Punky Meadows, man, he looks like a grandma. He's still got all that hair and everything. He's still got the same hair, but he's like, it's weird. He looks like Grandma Meadows.
He may be Grandpa Meadows at this point. I don't know.
Oh, he looks like Grandma Meadows.
Yeah, man, but those guys, they inspired, out of that band came, what was the other band? Jafria, didn't Greg Jafria come from there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who went on to Craig Jafria went and played with Dio, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he played, yeah. And then he had his own band, Jafria.
Right.
Which was, I think you probably already said that.
Yep, I did.
But, yeah, I was, you have to bear with me. I'm getting old.
No, that's all right. So am I. I thought Angel only had 3 albums, so.
I was, on the West Coast. It was the 70s when On Earth As It Is in Heaven came out. I was 14. And, I was like, Angel, I saw it. They were really promoting it in the record stores at the time. They had a whole wall full of that album. And I thought it must be good. They got this whole wall dedicated to it. So I got the album and I was hooked. I was a huge Angel fan. And I talk about him now and nobody remembers him. So glad you remembered Angel. Because
I've got a couple of their albums here.
Really? Wow.
Apparently only 3. But hey, you can take their logo and turn it completely upside down and backwards, and it reads the exact same.
Yeah, I had an Angel silver necklace that I got at the Angel concert in '78. And yeah,
that's awesome.
It was so. I bet that thing would be worth money to a few people, like 3 people on the planet, probably.
Yeah,
Punky Meadows might buy it.
Yeah.
But I loved his style. He was his vibrato, it's like every note was like a celebration. He was so good. Nobody had vibrato like Punky. He wasn't a very good guitar player, but his style was through the roof. He was just dripping with style. And, he's always been my guitar hero because of that. It's like if I could just do that vibrato like Punky Meadows, and just make that thing just sing. Man. But yeah, so we're here to talk about Rush, but Yeah,
Right.
a lot of those other bands, it's kind of, when I was a kid, in the 70s, I'm a little older than my co-host here, Brian. I got 9 years on him. So
Yeah.
when I heard my first Rush album, it was the first Rush album. And,
Really?
yeah, when I was, take it back to 1968, the summer of 68, I was 5 years old. And going on 6, I would have been 6 in September. And I was riding my little bike and riding it up in the forest. I grew up in the forest. So there was this brown track that they had made for go-karts. And I was riding around the track, and Eddie Nixon came riding in his little bike. He was 5. And, I said, Eddie, I said, what's your name? He goes, Eddie. I go, hey, Eddie, will you be my best friend? He's like, yeah, sure. So from the age of 5, me and Eddie were best friends, and we did everything together. And as we got older, we would sit around listening to music together, where back then you would go get it for 68 cents. You'd cash in some bottles and get a little single, a record, an actual vinyl little record. And whatever was the new hit, we'd be, listening to it. And we were over at his sister's, his big sister's house. No, we were at his dad's, and his big sister, her boyfriend had left the first Rush album there. And we put that thing on the summer of 75, the summer of 76, when I was 13 going on 14. So I would have been 14 in a few months, 2 months. Anyway, my dad had given me permission to grow my hair out. And so we had both grown our hair out. We had really long hair. We were 13. We're both 13. And, we're still best friends. And I put on that first Rush album, and Geddy Lee, the singer, he sounded like a kid, but only a really hard rock. So I identified with that right away. And they sounded like they were best friends since they were little kids. They had that sound. There was something about their sound, like Alex and Geddy had grown up together. And, and that's the story they had. They met when they were real young, maybe 10 years old. They grew up in Willowdale, Ontario. And, they both played guitar, from the age of about 10. And Geddy was the only one that had an amplifier. So Alex would constantly call him up on the phone. Hey, Geddy, can I borrow your amp? Or, Gary, can I borrow your amp? Geddy's real name is, Gary Lee Weinrib. And, he'd say, hey, Gary, but anyway, he'd call on the phone, and his mom would answer the phone, and she was Yiddish. And so when Alex would call Geddy's house, he would say, is Gary there? And she'd say, yeah. And she'd go, Geddy. And and he'd come on the phone, and Alex would say, hey, it sounds like your mom is saying Geddy. He goes, no, she's Yiddish. She's saying Geddy. It sounds like Geddy. And so the name stuck. He became Geddy Lee from a real young age. Maybe since he was 10. And so, eventually in 1968, Alex called once again to borrow his amplifier, except for this time he wanted him to come play bass. And that was the legendary first gathering of Rush in late 1968 in a church basement, which they called the Coffin. And they were playing to about 30 people, and they served tea and potato chips. So it was back in 68. So tea and potato chips in Canada. Yeah, that was normal at a rock show. So
and everyone stayed in their seats.
I don't think he said that people would stand way at the back like they were diseased or something. They were scared of them.
Probably the first sign that they'd be huge.
Yeah, there you go. So they became a club band and a high school band. Now I'm old enough to remember the last of that. In the 60s and 70s, especially in the early 70s, high schools would get bands to come in, and they'd play. They'd play during the lunch hour, or, they'd play once a week. They'd set an hour aside, and it would be like an assembly, and this band would come in and play. That happened at my high school. or not high school. It was done by the time I got into high school in 77. So it was done by then. In junior high, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, there would be bands once a week. And that was really big in Canada. They were trying to keep the kids out of trouble. So they'd bring the rock bands into school to try to get it out of their system. So
yeah, my brother's, where my brother works at high school here, they had the Yardbirds play with Jimmy Page for the graduation one year.
Whoa. Really?
Yeah, imagine having the Yardbirds for your graduation band, you know what I mean?
Wow. Whoa. I didn't know like big names would play high schools.
Apparently they the story goes that the Yardbirds were coming through on a tour of the United States, so they had one extra day, and I don't know if they had played somewhere near Cincinnati or whatever, but anyway, somehow they booked a gig at St. Xavier High School. I mean, it's in the yearbook. It's in their yearbook, so that's pretty wild.
Wow, that's amazing. That's when Jimmy Page was playing his Telecaster.
Yep, the Dragon Telecaster.
Yeah. Which people don't usually think about Page on a Telecaster, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah, wow. That's how it was back then.
Yeah, and I know Rush had kind of almost like got their career off the ground by playing at those high school gigs, because they were pulling some pretty big crowds, it seemed like, at one point.
Yeah, I've seen the history of Rush, and it showed with this one high school gig. You can actually see it on YouTube. It's a big crowd.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a pretty cool book out too that I forget who put it out. I bought it for my friend, but I haven't read it yet. But it talks about every show that they've ever played, and what the attendance was, and what the ticket sales were, like as far as the price, and what their take was from the monetarily their take and everything like that. It's a pretty cool book because it talks about every show, where they played, who they played with, the reviews from the papers that they got, and the ticket prices and attendance. So that's a pretty cool book.
Oh, cool! Wow. You know, I remember Alex saying that his first gig they got $10, not each. He goes, not each. It's $10.
Yeah, my earliest recollections of Rush were so my dad would. I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't like a really super strict Christian home. Not only that, but there was a ton of kids in my family, so it was hard to keep us all reined in. But my dad would play for like car trips or whatever to try to keep us calm. He would turn on the radio, and occasionally, a lot of times when he wanted to put us to sleep, he put us on the jazz station, which probably has something to do with my love for jazz now. But he occasionally he'd put on the rock station here, and Rush always stood out on the radio to me because of, like you said, Geddy Lee's voice especially. But one of the earliest songs I remember hearing was Free Will by Rush, and I typically would always get the lyrics wrong from Rush. You and I were laughing about that at the beginning of this before we went live, but so the lyrics to Free Will, it was like, I thought he was saying, you can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. And it sounded to me like, because it sounded like he said, dragons that can kill. For some reason, I got that in my head, instead of kindness that can kill. And I'm like, man, this guy's singing about Dungeons and Dragons. This is awesome, you know? Because at my age at the time, I'm sitting there thinking like a big Dungeons and Dragons nerd, you know? And I'm thinking, oh man, this band sounds like they're pretty nerdy like me, which is funny because they do sort of appeal to the crowd who's into that type of imagery. And then later on, when I was in Boy Scouts, my Boy Scout troop was a horrendous troop of guys that was all like, you know, filled with like drug dealers and stuff like that. Basically, they used there were a bunch of teenage kids that used the Boy Scouts as a way to go on campouts and, you know, party and stuff. But I remember one of our camping trips we went out. One of the scout leaders, we were listening to the local rock station here on Saturday night, or maybe Friday night, and Tom Sawyer came on and he cranked it up. I had never heard it before. but he was just like, yes, and cranked it up. And man, I was just like, this is awesome. And I found out later it was Rush, but I was like, man, these guys are cool. So it's kind of like the way it was presented to me made it appealing. And then shortly after that, I had bought a K-Tel cassette. Remember, I know you remember K-Tel albums.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was one called White Hot Masters of Metal, and it came out in '84, and it had Rush doing Distant Early Warning, and that was when I was like, oh man, I'm going to go out and buy some Rush. So I think I cut some lawns, enough money to go out and buy a cassette version of Caress of Steel, and I bought Caress of Steel, and I thought to myself, because I looked at the back of the song track listing, and I was like, there's nothing on here that I recognize. I took it home and popped it in, and I was just blown away, because even though there were no radio songs on there, just that album was just rocked me, man. It was so cool, like so hard, so heavy, all kinds of like sci-fi fantasy lyrics, and I was just like, wow, this is awesome. So that was when I, first, put some money into investing in my Rush collection.
Yeah, that was very nerdy too. I mean, because you had the Necromancer and the Fountain of Limnath, and it was conceptual. I was like conceptual metal. I was like,
yeah, totally.
And it was like, to me, it was like Yes, if Yes was hard rock, sort of.
Yeah.
That's what it sort of reminded me of. And I always thought that they must have listened to Yes, and it turns out that's pretty much all they listened to. Yes, and Genesis, Pink Floyd. Yeah. That was their thing. That's what they listened to, when they listened to other music. So,
and I mean, even Zeppelin had that element. I mean, Zeppelin had a tendency to be, at least harder sometimes. They could be soft as well. But I mean, Zeppelin, a lot of people, I guess, probably most of the time wouldn't categorize them as progressive rock, but I think they were. And I know Rush was into them, or at least Lifeson was anyway.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what gave them their edge. I mean, and I know that Neil Peart was Peart or whatever Peart. He was into bands like Cream and Zeppelin too. So I think that's where they got their heavy edge from.
For those listening, or wondering about the early history of Rush, I could kind of walk you through it. They came out with their first album, and they didn't like it, so they found a producer, an engineer who remixed it, had them add some more songs to it. It came out. It got caught by radio station WMMS in Cincinnati,
Cleveland.
Cleveland. I'm sorry, Cleveland. Sorry, that's right. WMMS in Cleveland, which is basically across the border from where they were, basically.
Right.
And they played Working Man and got hooked on it and decided to start playing the album. The girl that was working there, I can't remember her name, but she was instantly a Rush fan, and she just started spamming them all over the radio. And they became famous, in Cleveland. And they'd be walking down the street, and people would be yelling at them, driving by in cars, and they were stars in Cleveland, and they got picked up in '74 by Mercury Records, and who re-released the album. I don't think they remixed it. And then their second album came out with Fly By Night, which had a lot of songs that they had written even before their first album, but they didn't think that was marketable. So once they got a name, they got the first album out, then they came out with the weird stuff. It's got Anthem and Bytor and the Snow Dog. And
I got to say, I mean, it's kind of funny that a female was like the first, big fan of Rush that launched them, considering that their, fan base is predominantly male, it seems like.
Yeah, they say when they do concerts, they see mostly guys.
Yeah, doing air drums and air guitar while the band's playing on stage.
They do say they do have a female following, though. It's not huge, but I mean, it's there.
Oh yeah, definitely. But it's just kind of funny to think that the first person who like blew them up was a female. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's kind of ironic. Yeah. And then they came out with Caress of Steel. When they did that tour, it was so strange that music they had gotten so far into the conceptual stuff. They really loved that album. They were really proud of it, but it didn't do very well. It didn't sell very well. And when they played that tour, it was like, they called it the Down the Tubes tour, and they were almost ready. They were about ready to give up. The record company was screaming at them, like, what the heck is this? You know, what are you doing? We want some singles. We want some hit singles. We want something. This weird stuff, you know, it's not going to cut it. So they had a big conversation, and they decided to go out in a blaze of glory with 2112. And it was not what the record company wanted, and the record company was angry. But they released it, and 2112, that was it. That was their big hit right there. It got them really noticed by everyone, you know, and word of mouth and everything. And the sales on that just went through it. It sold so many albums that the record company said, look, you guys just do what you do, you know? So, you know, once that one came out, then the greatest album, in my opinion, the greatest album that was ever released in the universe at any time came out after that. And that was Farewell to Kings. And that album, that album belongs hanging up in the Louvre Museum in France.
I agree. That is an amazing album, man, from beginning to end.
It's breathtaking to me. I think that God wrote Farewell to Kings. I think that he had a big hand in it. I really do. You know, the lyrics in Farewell to Kings is what got me. So I was 15 when Farewell to Kings came out. I was actually 14 when it was released, but I heard it when I was 15 and just turned 15. And, I had been listening to a lot of hard rock, a lot of Montrose. I was into Montrose and, you know, a lot of hard rock and Bachman Turner Overdrive. And, when that album came out, and then the first Rush album, and I hadn't even I'd heard 2112, but I loved it, but you know, when Farewell to Kings came out, all of a sudden, it was the same time my grandma handed me the Tao Te Ching, which is the book of Tao, Lao Tzu, you know, philosophy, Eastern thought, you know, and you're an expert on Eastern philosophy. You know, I know the book of Tao, but you know all about that stuff.
Me?
Yeah. And
I wouldn't call myself an expert.
way more than I am. But, you know, the lyrics of Farewell to Kings, you know, they turned their gaze from the castles in the distance, eyes cast out on the path of least resistance. And it just spoke to me about how the world was going wild. And we were living in the Cold War, you know, in the science age, the nuclear age, you know, the rocket age. And it seemed like a world gone wild to me. I was like, I should not have been born. I wish I wasn't born now, because we're all going to blow up, you know, and it just, it spoke to me, you know, when they read of us with sadness for the seeds that we've let grow, you know, it's just like, what have we done? Look, we're all about to blow up, you know, and I just, it was just the lyrics of that were so philosophical and deep. It really got me. I thought, wow, you know, there's more to rock and roll than just, fast cars and fast women. You know, which is what I was in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they may have set the benchmark or whatever, but they also brought to the forefront the thinking man's music. You know what I mean? At least to hard rock, like where Yes was doing that in the prog, like specifically prog, arena. Like, I think Rush kind of did it with the hard rock. You know what I mean? They reached the hard rockers with the thinking man's music type approach.
Yeah, it was. It really was the thinking man's music. It really was. You know, that whole album was all about that. And then you had Cinderella Man, which was about a philanthropist, you know, who had his heart broken and decided to cast his riches to the poor. And you know, it was like philanthropy and philosophy and then science fiction. You had the black hole of Cygnus X1. And so it was everything a sci-fi nerd and a thinking kid would want. in a band, and it was deep, and the music was really deep, really got you, stuck to your ribs, haunting melodies, just so well crafted. That album, Farewell to Kings, if anybody hasn't heard Farewell to Kings, go out and get it, or at least YouTube it, because that thing will change your life. It's like, wow, it's, wow. But then, they released Hemispheres, which was a continuation of the Black Hole of Cygnus X1. That's after they went through the black hole.
People might think that you're joking, but you're serious.
I am, yeah. It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's and that gets into almost, it's like, it uses like Greek, references,
Dionysus, Apollo, and, Olympus. When the Cygnus X1 Book 2, that's the opening track or whatever, pretty much picks up where they left off with Farewell to Kings, and like you said, it goes into like the whole Greek kind of like it kind of lays out a story that sounds like something directly from like one of Sitchin's translations from the what do you call it, Sumerian tablets or whatever.
Yeah. 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 It's, and then the other side is like, almost radio worthy music, which, Circumstances and, the trees really got me. My grandma liked the Trees. She was really into trees. So I got, Grandma, check this song out. It's called The Trees. In like 1978, Grandma's like, just rocking out to the Trees. It was pretty cool. And then, that album, that Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, that was like all there was to music to me at the time. And it was the same with a lot of kids out there. A lot of teenagers were into that. They picked up a lot of fans. And then, when they came out with Permanent Waves, I mean, that was like that was totally different, really, but it was still really hard rock and still had that, philosophical thinking man type lyrics to it, and, then the album that came out after that with Tom Sawyer and all that, I can't say the name of it.
Moving Pictures?
Moving Pictures, yeah. That was pretty much where I fall off of the whole Rush conversation, because I had pretty much, I liked some of the songs off of Signals and a little bit of tiny, like one song off of Presto and one song off of Roll the Bones, and then they lost me. I don't even know the names of their albums after that. After Moving Pictures, that's when I dropped off. I won't be able to talk about anything Rush after Moving Pictures. That's where you're going to have to take over, because I don't even know that material.
Well, yeah, it was after, we left off at, Moving Pictures.
Yeah.
And let me bring up the discography here.
Was it Signals after that?
I believe Signals was right afterwards, so here we go.
No.
So, yeah. No, great. Signals was, that's the one that had, the big hit on there was Subdivisions. So I'm sure, a lot of people, that's a radio track, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That was a good, I loved that song.
What's that?
I loved that song. That was a good song.
Yeah.
Subdivisions.
And this was a period where I think really starting with a lot of people, well, I've heard, now this is just somebody else's opinion, but I've heard a lot of people say that Farewell to Kings was kind of like their departure from the prog, like the prog elements but Hemispheres had just as much, so I don't know what they're talking about with that. But Permanent Waves kind of set a new precedent for Rush, I think, in the sense that they streamlined their music and they tightened it up a little bit, and they sort of started to set the standard for what would later become, I think, new wave and like 80s music, because the keyboards that they were using or the way that they were using the keyboards was a little more something that we saw come out in the 80s music, bands like Missing Persons or something like that. So I don't know how much influence Rush in particular had on the 80s bands, but they started the movement toward, or at least if they didn't start the movement toward 80s like pop music or whatever, they were definitely not really that far outside of it, in my opinion. Then you had like Moving Pictures, which was heavily, there's a lot of keyboards on there. Same with Signals. And when I say had heavy keyboard influence, I don't mean that. I mean, the guitar was still there, but some of the guitars started to take a back seat a little bit, I think, to the keyboards. And then with Signals, it was the same kind of thing. And you could even hear them talking about their move away from what they had done, because in Moving Pictures, on the album Moving Pictures, they got the song Limelight, right? I mean,
yeah,
that song's about integrity in what you're doing as far as a musician. I mean, at least that's one of the narratives in the song.
Yeah, and, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and so Signals had some like lyrical content like that as well. And then once you hit Grace Under Pressure, which was 84,
yep,
then that was really heavily keyboard led, and it had this really cool vibe that really stands out like from the rest of their albums. It's got a lot of like reggae kind of influence, not in the traditional Bob Marley type sense, but it's got this a lot of clean guitars, and just the rhythms that they used had changed a little bit. They had completely moved away from like odd time signatures that dominated the songs and things like that. And there was a whole like Cold War feel to Grace Under Pressure. A lot of the lyrics had to do with, kind of like what you were envisioning for mankind at the time, like, destruction by way of technology, or destruction by way of like nuclear war or whatever.
Yeah, Permanent Waves, Natural Science was all about that. It was scary because of that. But anyway, go ahead.
No, that's cool. Yeah, the end of Permanent Waves, man. Like, if I had a bad habit as a kid of like back in the day when there was cassette tapes, then I would listen to the first side of an album and forget. I'd just rewind it and go back to the first side again because I loved it so much. And it took me forever till I flipped that tape over and like, oh my gosh, the second side of this album is better than the first side. But so Power Windows, then that's when they started to sort of like have a more like radio friendly sound, I think. I'm not an expert on Power Windows. I liked it. That was the album that had Big Money, which was the hit on that one.
86, 87, 86 probably.
85, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. And then Hold Your Fire was 87. That was when I was in high school. And then Time Stands Still was on there. And that's even got, what's her name from Till Tuesday singing on it. Amy Mann.
I saw Till Tuesday live at the Starry Night in Portland in 1985.
Oh, wow.
Or 1984 when it first came out.
Cool.
Remember that song? I can't think of the name of that song.
Voices Carry?
Voices Carry. Yes. And I was in the front row and the guitar player was making googly eyes at me. He was gay. Anyway.
So, yeah, I mean, Rush's image changed. They went from their big, from their longer hair with the facial hair and even the big robes that they were wearing for a while there. They dropped that whole thing and they took on the whole 80s look, lock, stock, and barrel. Skinny jeans and what do you call them? Mullets and everything like that. So
short hair. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Hold Your Fire was really good. It had some great songs on it. Then they moved to Presto, which that yielded them some more like radio hits or whatever. Production values kind of changed a little bit again. I think they sort of changed production values from album to album progressively, and it's funny how all these things work too, because so many things are, you know, circular or cyclical. It's like they got away from the hard rock sound, you know, from the 70s and moved into this really high produced, well produced, kind of almost sometimes the music, maybe not Rush in particular, but bands kind of got hollow in the 80s, that whole curve that you see on your EQ curve where the mids are going.
Yeah, it sounded thin.
Yeah. And they put reverb on everything, you know, like, and that was, you know, the big hair bands did the same thing. I think it was an attempt to make everything sound epic or something. I don't know. I don't really know what the intent.
Make it sound bigger.
Yeah. And then, so then they moved to Roll the Bones, and this is where I saw them first. When I saw them live, was on the Roll the Bones tour, and Eric Johnson opened up for him, and I pretty much slept through that. Nothing against Eric Johnson, I just wasn't a big big fan.
Yeah,
and
he played the guitar weird too.
What's that?
He played the guitar like backwards or upside down, sort of like a piano on his lap.
No, that's Jeff Healey.
I'm just Jeff Healey. Okay, I'm sorry. There we go. Sorry. Look at me.
The blind guy that played?
Yeah. Look at me. Jeff Healey. Okay. Sorry. I was never into that kind of stuff, so I just,
I did say Eric Johnson, right?
That's you did. I get the two mixed up.
Eric Johnson wasn't like he was a you know, phenomenal guitar player, but at the time I wanted shredders, you know what I mean? If it wasn't Yngwie or you know, somebody like that. But
Yngwie Marching Out. Oh man, I wore that album out. Yngwie, Rising Force Marching Out, that album, the second album. Wow. Oh man.
Yep.
Anyway, I was total Yngwie fan. He was so cool.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine. So Roll the Bones had even more radio hits on it, pushed them to, like, you know, big prominence and like in their popularity. Counterparts was when they started to, I think they kind of seemed like they kind of went back under the radar a little bit with Counterparts. There was like at least one or two radio songs on that one. I can't think of them off the top of my head at the moment. I could look it up, but Counterparts is where I fell out. Like you had mentioned that. So Stick It Out was one of the radio songs, and Nobody's Hero, that was kind of talking about. I guess because they mentioned like a guy who's like gay in the song or something, so it's kind of like, I think that was kind of their virtue signaling, you know what I mean? Before virtue signaling was a thing.
Yeah.
I think they made good points with regards to what they were saying in the song, I think.
Like Rod Stewart, Georgie Boy. Remember Georgie Boy? Georgie Boy was gay, I guess. Nothing more and nothing less. The kindest guy I ever knew. I like that song. That's a pretty good song.
Yeah.
Anything Rod Stewart did, I liked any Rod Stewart. But anyway,
I agree.
Really? You too?
Oh yeah, I love Rod Stewart. Yep.
Oh yeah.
So Counterparts was the album that they kind of started to lose me. That was probably that point I was like, this is starting to get into territory that I don't really, musically, it was okay, but I thought it was weak. And then, you know, I wasn't paying any attention to him after that. And it took them 3 years to release Test for Echo. When that came out, that was 96 when that came out. But by that time I was playing in a punk band and, doing different projects, playing thrash metal and punk. And I just really wasn't paying attention to Rush as much anymore. But then I had gone back afterwards. I went back and checked it out, and it's a really good album. And then they did Vapor Trails, Snakes and Arrows, and Clockwork Angels were the next albums after that. I don't even know that I've ever even listened to Clockwork Angels. I've probably heard it once somewhere. But I know Snakes and Arrows had some good stuff on it. Vapor Trails had some good stuff, but Test for Echo was really good. I still go back to that, from time to time and listen to that album because I think that was a really good. But I guess my point was that they went back to the sound that they had abandoned in the 80s when they got to Test for Echo. They went back to really a heavier sound, probably really honestly heavier sound than they ever had. The guitars were way out front again, good, almost like metal type riffs and stuff like that. Great lyrics, still doing, they kind of went back to nerdy stuff again, that was kind of cool, cause I love songs that are about weird stuff, time travel or any kind of scientific stuff,
Yeah. That's what was so cool about Rush. They gave us geeks something to listen to.
Yeah. You could have long hair, but still be a nerd, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
and you ran into all those people at the shows.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. You're like, oh man, I didn't know you were a Rush fan. Some people that you knew,
there's a new album, or they're not new. I mean, it's got to be 5-6 years old. I heard about, somebody was telling me about, they had gone completely back to their roots. I don't even know what that album is.
Might be Snakes and Arrows, but I mean, I haven't heard it, so I know we won't be getting any more out of them, because in case any of the people who are listening don't know that Neil Peart had passed away earlier this year. So
sadly,
yeah, I mean, one of the best rock drummers, or arguably the best rock drummer of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
2020.
They would
2020. That's just another thing to add to 2020.
Oh yeah, yep, definitely. And it's I don't know what the outlook from the guys from Rush would be, but I mean, I would have to guess they probably wouldn't continue as Rush without Peart. I don't know.
No, they'll probably release some project stuff, with somebody.
Yeah.
Maybe John Bonham's son, maybe. Somebody like that. Jason Bonham.
Yeah. And he, the guys from Rush have done solo projects. Lifeson did.
My Favorite Headache.
That was, I think that was Geddy Lee's. A solo project. Alex Lifeson did. Oh man, now it's going to escape me. I just had it in my head a second ago.
I remember in the 90s, I saw it. I never heard it, but I saw it. I saw him talking about
Victor.
It on the website.
That's what it was called.
What?
It's called Victor.
Victor.
Yeah, that was the name of the quote-unquote band or solo project. And I remember hearing it when it came out, and I remember thinking it wasn't bad, but it came out at a time for me. It was let me see, it was 96 when that came out. Once again, I wasn't really paying attention. I was listening to Dag Nasty and old school hardcore, Youth of Today or Chain of Strength. I was my focus was way away from rock music. I was listening to either punk or metal or underground radio, alternative college radio or something. In 96. So
I remember at the turn of the century, I got into deep house, techno minimal, deep house Russian. Deep
I don't
mix.
even know what that is.
Moscow Radio, deepmix.ru. Yeah, deep house, techno minimal. It's one or two guys on synthesizers soloing and improvising. I love it. I love that stuff.
Huh.
I got into it. I got hooked on it. What?
They still do that in the local bars around here.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. I imagine myself, as a Russian mafia gangster guy with all these, chicks hanging out, with drinks, chicks with names like Helga and, Anya and I'm joking. I like the Russian deep house though. It's cool. Anyway.
Yeah. So speaking of Peart, Neil Peart, I guess he was one of for the most part, he was the lyricist for the band. I mean, I know that they all contributed somewhat, but he was an avid reader. They may I guess they all were, but Peart was kind of he comes from like an intellectual kind of approach, and wrote a lot of the lyrics, and so I figured we'd talk a little bit about kind of like what his beliefs were that made their way into the lyrics of Rush. But
yeah, because this is Philosopher rock, so we have to take apart the philosophy of Rush. I mean, we've done it to a point, but we need to go deep. Yeah, but we need to go deeper into that.
Yeah, and how we had talked about the sci-fi and fantasy elements of the lyrics already, and that there's a few of the songs that have like stories of like dystopian societies. I mean, 2112 is kind of like that.
Yeah,
and,
people say that was modeled after the Fountainhead, but no, that's Anthem. I don't know if that's my favorite book in the world is Anthem. Anybody who's ever wanted to read really good sci-fi, it's Ayn Rand. I know people call her Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, I think it was her first book. It's only 100 pages long, and it's a story about a future society which is a collectivism, which has never happened in the world. Collectivism is a imaginary thing like communism or socialism or capitalism. Collectivism is an imagined ultimate society where everybody is part of a collective. It's like the Borg. The Borgs are collectivism, like to the maximum extreme. But individualism was not allowed in this collectivism worldview, this system. And so the only death penalty in this collective society in the book Anthem was to say the word I, to identify as an individual. If you were caught saying the word I, or me, it was the death penalty. And nobody was allowed, everybody was assigned a certain job, and they weren't allowed to deviate from that job. They had their place in the collective. And anyway, in the book Anthem, a guy wanders off and he finds this cave, and it's like a tunnel, and he finds a light bulb in there, and he plays around with it and he gets it working. And this is when technology had been abandoned, and he finally escaped. He finally escaped the collective. He found somebody else, found a girlfriend, and escaped the collective. But and at the end, he identifies as an individual. And so 2112 is the same thing, only the guy finds a guitar under a waterfall. And he takes it to the priests, it's like, look what I found, to the collective. And they're like, no way, dude.
This is going to be nothing but trouble.
Another toy that helped destroy the elder race of man.
Exactly.
But that was huge. There was a lot of philosophy in there. There was Ayn Rand, Anthem, and it was a model of the collective, which that's very heady stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the philosophy. Go ahead.
And on Fly By Night, they actually did a song called Anthem, which is a great song.
Yes.
But which was before 2112. But yeah, you're totally right. I read Anthem back in, I think it was high school, and man, what a great book!
Oh,
like you said, that's a really cool book.
There is a free audio version on the net if anybody wants to search for it. It takes you about an hour and a half to get through it. Awesome. Anyway,
yeah, that's really, really cool story.
In the Christian community, people really put down Ayn Rand, especially Dr. Future's really down on her. And I see there's parts of her that are kind of contrary to Christian thought, but a lot of her stuff is really good, worth thinking about. I mean, at least as an educational model for, society and things like that.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's important for us as Christians to understand other people's perspectives and their worldviews, so that we can talk to them, relate to them, but also so that we can see how our worldview is superior or, makes more sense. And it's like the whole thing with collectivism, and it's the same with a lot of these other philosophies or worldviews, the problem is they a lot of times, or always really, they'll take one thing and they'll make it more important than the rest of the things, and then they'll run with that. And, this is a reason why, as far as I'm concerned, Christianity is superior, is the fact that, it does identify the individual and ascribes worth to the individual. And it doesn't take the collective, that collectivism does, and say, everybody's got to, lose their identity for the benefit of the entire group or whatever, like a socialistic type society or whatever. And it's like the Christian worldview identifies the human being as being valuable and identifies the collective as being valuable as well. And I don't know, people who have maybe listened to Philosopher Rock before, of course, I'm going to have like recurring themes that I can't avoid. And this is going to be one of them. It's the idea that, human beings have to fall somewhere in the order of importance, in every worldview that looks at human beings, tries to account for all these different kinds of things. And, it's like in the hierarchy of creation, human beings typically in other worldviews, they get either demoted too low or elevated too high. And in Christianity, I think it puts us as human beings in the correct space that they're supposed to be. And I think that our fallen nature is such that we want to elevate ourselves to higher than where we need to be, or where we belong. And I think that that's what's happening with Ayn Rand and some of the things that like Peart was originally, originally on at least, because I know he was later quoted as having moved away from these types of ideas. But kind of the idea with objectivism is that it's rational egoism. It's the pursuit of one's own happiness as their highest endeavor. And, we know we're going to run into problems if that's the way that we move forward, is that the pursuit of one's own happiness is the highest endeavor. Well, the problem is we don't all have the same, idea of what, constitutes happiness. So one person loves to do something like have every other man's wife. That's the thing that brings him the most happiness. That he should be free to pursue that. That's going to be a problem for So we're going to have conflicting ideas on what what the pursuit of happiness, which pursuits of happiness are valid pursuits. And that's where morals come in. But sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there. I was just kind of wanted to expand a little bit. And I like you, I see that Ayn Rand has definite, her writings have definite important points in them. If, like I said, for no other reason than to show us, what wrong thinking looks like.
Yeah, I thought a lot of the stuff that she wrote about was an example of wrong. I mean, I don't think she liked the societies that she painted very much.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Although she was involved with some, some questionable people, but I don't know. I think that's kind of guilt by association, which I don't practice. I have a big problem with guilt by association. I know some pretty evil bastards. So you could nail me on that. And it's because I mix in with everybody. I'm just that kind of person. I could be around like evil Captain Nemo. His favorite saying is, it's a sick world and I'm a happy guy. So, and I've, in the early 90s when, the web was first forming, I did a lot of web design for him because I was the only one, that could do it. There wasn't anybody that built websites. I was like one of the first and worked with him a lot and tried to witness to him a lot, and I think I got to him finally, I just kept pounding him with Jesus because every time you get into some philosophy, you'll find Jesus standing right there. I mean, he's hard to avoid whenever you get very deep.
Well, that's the thing, like with this, any of these worldviews, they're going to have to, a lot of times what they want to do is they want to reject morals, of course, but then they'll smuggle in their own morals, or because human beings just aren't able to live at all without some sort of code of ethics or morality. And when they try to relativize it or subjectivize it to one person's own, like, hey, this is true for me, or this is true, and whatever's true for you, that kind of approach. The problem is we're going to have clashes because people aren't going to agree, and it's like,
yeah.
No,
I wasn't.
And then,
yeah, go ahead.
With Christianity, the thing that is so, I think, is like far superior is the idea that, kind of like how you were saying, guilt by association. It's like we're all guilty. So, maybe it's kind of like to lesser or greater degrees, but we're all guilty, and that's the only thing that matters. Because if you're a lawbreaker, you're a lawbreaker. So, because we've all broken the law, it's like the cross is the only place where humans are actually going to be equal or on equal footing. And that's in our brokenness and our guilt before God, who, by the way, loved us enough to condescend to our level in order to rescue us from the sins and crimes that we've committed against not only each other, but primarily against him. So if we want to find equality, we could find it best at the foot of the cross, where we all belong and where we're properly in our station in our hierarchy. So,
yeah, the problem with these worldviews and other philosophies is that ultimately they don't have an answer. There's no actual solution in the end.
That's true.
It comes to a desolate end, or
yes,
an empty end with no real answer. And especially when you're talking about death, I mean, none of all these worldviews, they attempt to answer life, but they have no answer for death.
That's true too.
That's the biggest difference, And
totally.
And the human condition, they try to address the human condition and attempt to create a society model built around the human condition, but the human condition has fallen. And like you said, in other words, you've said the same thing, that that's the problem.
Exactly.
And and also while I'm here, the time that we're doing this, the date that we're doing this broadcast, I just wanted to take us off on a side road real quick, is we're on the 3rd of January. And our founding fathers, me and Brian Day, are both Americans. Usually when you listen to Philosopher Rock, you've got an American, Brian, and GK down in Australia. So, but today when you're listening to Philosopher Rock Live, the only live broadcast of Philosopher Rock, so we're gonna, let's make some mistakes and say something stupid, and that'll be really live. But while we're here on this day, talking about the human condition, our founding fathers of America understood the human condition, and they wrote the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, live radio, the Declaration of Independence were all documents that addressed and made provision for the fallen nature of man. And so and we're dealing with this right now in this country right now. So people around the world and Americans, I'd just like to ask you to say a prayer for America right now, because we are about to go into some really, really volatile times here. Things are about to
is true.
Things are about to go nuclear here. Not literally, but it's about to get real sketchy here, because I
agree with you.
We've got, it seems that we have like a criminal takeover of the presidential election right now. That's the way it's looking. And we have a president that knows it. And so there's going to be a fight. And it's going to get ugly. Things are going to get ugly. So people around the world that are listening to this, could you stop and say a prayer for America and us Americans, because we need it. We need it.
Mm-hmm.
But
G'day, this is GK, and you're listening to Philosopher Rock. To listen to all of our previous shows, just go to our website, likeflintradio.com. That's likeflintradio.com, and click on the Philosopher Rock icon. If you want to contact us, you can email us at philosopherrock@gmail.com. That's philosopherrock@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit Johnny's website, ironshow.com. That's ironshow.com. And for Radio on the Fringe, visit fringeradionetwork.com. That's fringeradionetwork.com. Okay, let's get back to Johnny and Brian and their analysis of Rush.
so getting back to Rush, I mean, Neil Peart he wasn't a Christian, but he had the same questions that people have just before they become a Christian.
Right. And if can I before we get off this topic too
Yes.
far, I just want to say, like, based on the idea, because you and Not So Many Words said that, when people follow these worldviews to their logical conclusion, you said it's destruction and things like that, and it is, and I think what happens is it ends in dictatorship, and it ends it with like one person in control, or one entity in control, dominating over the rest of humanity. What that may be through like political means or whatever, but it's basically the one with the biggest guns or the most amount of money or the most power wins and has control, and that's what the outworkings of these other philosophies lead to at their logical end. And so every other religion or worldview, also one of the problems is it's works based, requiring more of the human being than the human is capable of. Like, hence the lifting of the human to the higher level, a higher level than is fitting for a human. So the failure of humans to save themselves or solve their biggest problems, kind of like you said, our biggest problem is death, ultimately. And
that's why we're heading towards transhumanism. Now they're trying to address that.
Yeah, they're trying to sidestep death now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's totally awesome the way you said, like, Jesus keeps getting in the way. Like, it's awesome because he's that good, he's that awesome that he keeps stepping in front of every path that, human beings try to go down. Jesus is there. He's stepping in front and saying, hey, I'm here. And then people try to sidestep him and go around him. And the difference with Christianity is it's grace-based. So it's not anything that man can attain to on his own. It's not something that he can pull down. Christianity is grace-based, and it's apprehended by those who are willing to recognize and admit their need for forgiveness. And at that point, they're transformed by being set free of the guilt, which they are acutely aware of. And then they're able to extend that same grace to other human beings, which changes the world by way of true selflessness or self-sacrifice, and love for one another. And that's really how humans are going to be able to get along, so to speak. So I just before we went, back to talking about Peart and his non-Christian views, but his search for answers, I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
Yeah, in the end, it's going to be all these visions for societal models. In the end, it's like you say, it always leads to a dictatorship. And if you're a futurist Christian, then obviously we're talking about the Antichrist and the one world,
right?
Ruling the whole world, by force
or subjection, yeah.
Might, yes. And so that's where it's going to end up. And then your Christian model of a Christian type societal model of government and everything, that's going to be the answer. Jesus is going to come back in person and rule for 1,000 years. If you're a futurist, if you're premillennial, that's what you would hold. And that will be the answer to that. And then it will be the model you're talking about, the model of self-sacrifice and loving your brother, but still not forgetting the value of the individual. I think people in the millennial reign, if you subscribe to the millennial reign of Jesus on earth, then you're talking about people who are very wildly individual, yet are also part of a collective, and are valued and show value to others. And it's going to be a great world. And there will still be sin if you study pretty deeply. Some sin, not a lot, but some on the outer outskirts. But even then, there will be so much power from Jesus that, they'll say, wow, this man died when he was 100 years old. Wow, he died young. It'll be I don't know if you've ever studied much of that, but it'll be a lot.
No, that's always fascinated me, though. But
yeah, it'll be the answer that you're talking about. That will happen, but not before. Not before we go through the greatest tribulation that has ever fallen upon the earth, as Jesus said, and the Antichrist and wearing down the saints and all that. And I think Neil Peart, the Rush lyrics, some of those pointed towards a situation like that, which was partly what Rush, to me, was a huge stepping stone to Jesus, because it got me thinking on that philosophical level, and modeling these societies and asking these really important questions in life, especially like Cinderella Man on Farewell to Kings. He finally he realized, after his heart was broken, that he finally realized that throwing his riches to the poor was the answer, and that's a Christian model right there. So it was, after listening to so much Rush and so much Yes, when I came to Jesus finally on an April morning in 1985, it was a natural transition for me. And, they say that Rush is not a Christian band, which they're not. But then why do so many Christians listen to Rush? I mean, that's like, of all of the young Christians, well, even old Christians, now, from young to old, the secular band that Christians listen to when they listen to secular music is usually Rush, which is fascinating to me. There's a whole philosophical thing you could get into right there.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's not by any accident, but probably by God's providence and sovereignty that even the bands like Rush, and I mean, for crying out loud, even Slayer. Like, if it wasn't for bands who were talking about like heavier, deeper things that make us think about the deeper questions, these are the kinds of things that prompt that kind of thought. So I, with you, agree that, in a way, rock and roll, heavy metal has actually led me to Jesus, and just by getting me to think, more about deeper questions, more than, say, like Starland vocal band, Skyrockets in Flight, Afternoon Delight. It's like
yeah, Montrose, Rock Candy, Bad Motor Scooter. That's what I was into before, I heard the first Rush album. And then, so, I mean, it got me. Rush is a great transitional band to Jesus. I've always said that there are a million paths to Jesus, but only one path to God. And things like Rush, bands like Rush and Yes, these are transitional stepping stones to Jesus, because they get people thinking of deeper things and questions, about life, where, instead of satiating what's the word I'm looking for? When a little baby sucks on a bottle, what's that called? It's,
pacify.
Yeah.
Pacify.
Instead of pacifying you with fast cars and fast women and distracting you, The bands like Rush lead you towards the next level of thought, you know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And then like all of sci-fi, you know, which is some of the themes that run through Rush, sci-fi and fantasy, they all contain elements of truth, because truth is the only fundamental material on which you can build any story anyway, fiction or otherwise.
Yeah, and truth is the only thing you can build any kind of science on.
That's true. Well, that's true. but you know, you know, make note that this truth that we're talking about is objective. It's outside of man, because if it existed before man, and it's also non-physical, which I would argue that it is non-physical. It doesn't have weight or length or whatever. So truth is a metaphysical property in it, and it's also transcendent. Now, of course, these philosophies like like objectivism and you know, naturalistic atheism reject those types of things, like metaphysical properties, like transcendent things or spiritual things, we might call them. But let's look at this for a second. Let's look at what we were joking about before we went on the air here. We were talking about the line in The Spirit of Radio by Rush, where it says, "The words of the prophets are written on the studio walls." Now, that's an homage that right there. They're making an homage to Simon and Garfunkel from their lyrics, which were, "Words of the prophets are written on the subway walls,"
right,
in their song "Sound of Silence" or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like it is. So one real quick aside is the idea that, I don't know about you, I think you'd agree with me, probably any rock and roller would, but radio, because that song, when Rush did that little spot in the middle of their song, "The Spirit of Radio," radio does have a sort of spirit to it. It's like, he kind of describes that in the song by Rush. It's like, it's got this like this, you know, power to it or whatever. And you know, what he's saying in the line, and that he lifted from Simon and Garfunkel's "Sounds of Silence," is that, you know, it's true, because musicians who espouse philosophies in their art, as well as like movie studios or whoever's doing art, it's just art in general, and anything that's communicating a message, the message of man and the outworking of mankind's philosophies other than Christianity is that, you know, they're laying out this self-fulfilling prophecy. So when he says the words of the prophets are written on the studio walls, I'm picturing him like with his lyric sheet, you know what I mean? He's got it tacked to the wall while he's singing into the microphone. And he's saying that, you know, we've got these self-fulfilling prophecies, and especially we see this kind of thing in the occult realm. I mean, there's books upon books of what their plan is for mankind. And God has given us the same kind of thing through the Bible. It's his written plan in which he uses the fallenness and brokenness of humans to bring about the ends that he has decreed. And so what I mean by that is just what kind of like what we were talking about. Like, he's taken the brokenness of humanity, the brokenness of humankind, through bands like Rush, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, or, you know, bands like that. Through their lyrics, God's using mankind's brokenness, and he's using it to bring about the ends that he decreed, which is salvation for you know, the people who come to him. And it's like, he used Rush to get to me. He used Rush to get to Johnny. He used, you know, Yes to get to us as well. And it just goes to show how awesome his providence is, that he takes what man means for evil, and he uses it for good. So, sorry, didn't mean to rant there.
No, that's great. That's absolutely right. You know, and I'm really, when you're talking about like Rush lyrics and Yes lyrics, they didn't mean it for evil, but they were serious questions that needed answers. You know?
Right. Well, what I mean is the outcome that mankind always strives for apart from God. That's evil. That's what I mean.
Oh, that manner of evil. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Anything that man builds humanistically is
right.
Evil, is naturally evil. You know, right. There's many different degrees of evil, but yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And some of the other song lyrics, you know, like with Closer to the Heart, the song Closer to the Heart, there's a lot of like collectivism going on there. And because they're talking about philosophers and plowmen, each must know his part. I mean, so I think one of the problems with pure collectivism is that human beings just can't even live that out. That's why you said it's like fantasy, like it's fictional or whatever.
Right.
Human beings are individual creatures, so it's impossible for them to actually live out a collectivist mentality. But
you would have to be in the Borg. You'd have to have implants and nanoparticles, nanoprobes, nanobots, and implants.
Right, exactly.
You would have to be literally connected to the collective in order to lose your individualism. And even then, there was a sect of Borg that had created a place where they could go and be individuals. So.
It is, and that's kind of like what happened in Anthem. I haven't read Anthem for 30 years, but he finds the place, and doesn't he find like an old thing, an inscription in a stone, and the word "I," and he's like, "What is this word I?" You know,
yeah.
Like it's like mankind will still always find their way back to, if not refusing to completely abandon individuality, they'll always, because that's just who we are. And
the human spirit is rebellious.
That's true.
We're rebellious to God. We're rebellious to each other. You know.
Yeah, that's one of the things that always makes me laugh when people think that they're going to try to institute all these policies on human beings and get all of them to follow lockstep, because it's just not going to happen. Our spirit, our fallen nature is rebellious, so we can't even do evil right. You know what I mean? We still mess up evil.
That's good. I like to frame that.
But so, like, you know, in the song Witch Hunt, like talking about kind of what's going on now in society, like the song Witch Hunt off of Moving Pictures, it's kind of funny because the script has flipped a little bit, like where, you know, think back to like the PMRC days in the 80s with Tipper Gore and stuff, and they wanted to censor, you know, rock albums or whatever. And it's like, you know, the music community, you know, had an outcry against, you know, the PMRC censoring. But look at what's going on now, where, you know, as we possibly move towards something more totalitarian, or at least right now, soft totalitarianism, it's like the words of the song Witch Hunt by Rush are kind of poignant, where it says, like, those who know what's best for us must rise and save us from ourselves.
Yeah.
Quick to judge, quick to anger, slow to understand, ignorance and prejudice, which prejudice, I'll take that word any day over racism, because racism is abused. That word is not, they don't use it the way it is intended to be meant.
Dude, I was almost arrested the other day for saying that I hated mustard at the burger place.
What kind of fascist would tell you that it's wrong to hate mustard?
I know, dude. It's getting bad. It's getting that bad. It's getting that bad.
I forgot you live in Portland. So.
I'm in Portland. Yeah, I'm from Portland. So I identify as cosmic seahorse gender. So you must refer to me by the pronoun shizism or shizisser, or I will be deeply offended and get triggered. You know.
But no, it says quick to judge, quick to anger, slow to understand, ignorance and prejudice, which I said prejudice is a much better word, and it says and fear walk hand in hand. So that phrase right there, ignorance and prejudice and fear walk hand in hand.
Which is true.
Like, yeah, totally. And you know, what are they trying to instill right now? Fear, you know what I mean, in the people, and at every turn. And it's like, even though I think probably the guys from Rush might have written this song with a Christian sort of thinking of kind of like making a poke at Christianity or like religious types that, you know, think back to the PMRC days where they wanted to burn albums or whatever because of offensive, quote unquote, offensive material. And it's like, now the other side has flipped the script a little bit. Now it's like what's being censored now, they want to censor, you know, pretty much everything, you know, and it's censorship gone kind of haywire. But I mean, it's like Rush's lyrics are full of these types of self-reflective themes and stuff like that. So it's timeless. And especially, well, I guess that's going to be the case because as long as it's human beings that are listening to it, it's going to be timeless. But these are matters. These are philosophical statements and situations, set up, scenarios set up, and societal models and questions and situations set up that are timeless. You could listen to that song at any point in history because it has no period that it's associated with. It has just the roots of the human condition. Right. And I can see at some point in the future, so you're like 58 now? Yeah. I can see Johnny, once his life's been extended through some sort of some sort of involuntary upgrade through transhumanism. Johnny, he's 110. He comes before the oracles that are running the world, and he brings them a copy, an old Farewell to Kings, scratched up copy of Farewell to Kings, and put this on the old phonograph that you have behind your throne, hidden back in your secret room where you guys actually jam out the Iron Maiden when the rest of us are. and they're going to say, this is the thing that brought us down to begin with, but. Yeah. Yeah. When in the future collective, well, we're heading towards a type of collectivism. I don't know, Antichrist rule. It'll look like collectivism, but it'll really be a dictatorship. Exactly. Where they're setting up a world model right now that looks like idealistic collectivism, but that's not what it really will be. Exactly. Secretly an evil dictatorship, But they're spinning it. They're putting such a spin on it, and people are buying it. People are buying it, hook, line, and sinker. It's amazing how many sheeple, that I deal with day to day and run into on the internet that are totally sold on this new societal model, and all the virtue signaling and everything. It's they're really being led like sheep to the slaughter. And it's because they see the value of the little bit of truth that's in it, and that's always the trick of the devil, right? I mean, because like I was saying even before, like fiction always has to have a little bit of truth, and they see the value of the little bit of truth, the kernel of truth that's in what's being said, and then they just go they run with that. They don't take the full scope of truth, just the little kernel that they hear in there. And they run with that. Let's get back to the original lie in the Garden of Eden. Ye shall be as gods, which was actually the truth. That wasn't the lie. Yeah. A lot of people say the devil, when he said ye shall be as gods, people say, oh, that was the original lie. But no, he was telling the truth there. The lie was you won't die. And exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Because they did become as gods, knowing good from evil, but now they're in that condition and they're going to die. That's bad. That's a bad place to be. Knowing good from evil and being mortal. That's a bad combination. That and having, how many ever gods, it's like there can only be one ultimate God, but if everyone tries to play the role of the one ultimate God, then you've got war. You know what I mean? Yes, and that is one. I don't want to say fault. That is one thing that you can use against me, because I do believe there's only one true religion. So now another religion can come at me and really have a problem with that, or another worldview, like a New Ager or a Muslim or a Buddhist. Because I do hold, what do you call that when you say exclusivity? The doctrine of exclusivity. Now, at least we can have something in common, because we all believe, Buddhists, Muslims, New Agers, we all believe in the God that created the universe. At some point, at some level, you get to there. At least with the New Agers, you have universe.
So, which is actually a creation, but at least you can get close. But I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just bouncing off of you. It's live radio.
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to say, so Rush has a song called Totem, and I think it's off of Test for Echo. But in the song Totem, he's basically putting forth the idea. He's kind of like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because he's saying, all these claims of religion and all these claims of truth, and he's it's a fallacious way of thinking, because just because there are many false claims doesn't mean that there's not one true claim. And actually, personally, I think that the existence of false claims point to the validity of at least a true claim. And it's like, he says in the song, I believe what I see, I believe in what I hear. But I would argue that there are many things that, the guys from Rush can't see or hear that they believe in.
Oh, and how about going back to the band Angel, one of my favorite all-time bands. When I saw them, their White Hot tour in '78, Doug Henning made them appear on the stage out of thin air. And so, do you believe that? Do you believe they could do that? No, it was an illusion, right? He made elephants disappear and stuff. Do you believe that? You saw it. Well, no, but it wasn't true. So believe what you see. No, you can't always believe what you see. Believe what you hear. You can't always believe that either.
Right. And the whole thing about claims to exclusivity, I mean, just in someone else's saying that your claim to exclusivity is wrong, they're making an exclusive claim. I mean, we can't get around claims of exclusivity. And this is, people just have not only forgotten how to think, they're partly lazy and they don't want to think because thinking's hard, and they've also been taught and indoctrinated not to think and rather to feel and go by what your feelings are. And just look at the song that we just talked about. He's making an appeal to his five senses,
right?
And it's like you just gave a demonstration of how you can be deceived through your five senses. You know,
shooting yourself on the foot with that one,
right? Yeah, and take for example like logic in general. The live radio.
Like presuppositional logic.
Yeah, the law of non-contradiction does not appear as a conclusion from an argument. It is the foundation of logic and thinking and reason. And I think people they don't care about the law of non-contradiction. They don't care about true sound reasoning. They want what they want, whatever satisfies their five senses. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that type of lifestyle is destructive to the human being. So,
it's any kind of atheism. You make a truth proclamation. There's no such thing as God. Well, how would you know that? Where's the logic? What's the logical path? Where's the presuppositional path that you've used to arrive at that conclusion that there's no such thing as God? In other words, how would you know that's true? How would you know? You can't prove you can't prove a negative. Is that a logical statement, or do I have that one wrong?
Oh, sure. No, you got it. Yeah, you can't prove it. You can't prove a negative.
Yeah.
And like in the song "Roll the Bones" by Rush, talking about origins and even like purpose or for a reason for mankind's existence. When you were talking about like all the different religions agree on certain things, but like in "Roll the Bones," he says, "Why are we here?" And he says his answer to "Why are we here?" He says, "Because we're here. Roll the bones." It's like a dismissal. It's a dismissal of the question of purpose, and it's an appeal to like random chance.
And he had gotten more atheistic and cynical in his old age. You can tell that.
Yeah.
And he was tired of answering the deep questions, and he thought he thought he'd go for a quick fix. I noticed that. Yeah, that's why I don't like the later stuff. It's cynical and kind of depressing.
And that's where that's the logical outworkings of these philosophies. I mean, it is cynical because there is no hope. You know what I mean?
No, No,
and like you said, there is no ultimate answer. So
yeah, and it just relies on people say things that are they have no they're not okay. Like you're least alone when you're by yourself. Well, that's just a play on words, assuming some kind of duality, right?
Right.
It's there's nothing real there. It's just a play on words, but it sounds very deep. You're least alone when you're by yourself, right? Right? There's a lot of sayings like that Neil Peart was kind of, doing twists on, right? That really had no meaning at all. They just sounded really cool. You're like,
right.
You can't, you follow that out to its logical conclusion and you find that it's desolate. There's nothing there.
Exactly.
That's why that's where Jesus steps in, because he has an answer to all of that. And that's the whole thing. He has, if you're listening to this, and you're an unbeliever, an atheist, or a agnostic, Jesus has an answer to death. That's what we're really looking for in the human condition, because we're all mortal and we all know the difference between good and evil. We have the knowledge of God. We're like God because we know good from evil, yet we're not like God because we're not immortal. So we have a mortality. We're born. Now, I believe in the doctrine of conditional immortality, where the human spirit is not born immortal, but the Bible says that God alone is immortal. And so we could get off on a terrible path there with probably getting into debate, but I'll leave it there. The human condition, we're born mortal. Our spirit is even mortal. Without Jesus, we've got a certain amount of time on the planet, and then we need an answer. Where we have, where are you going? And you could be there very soon. You could be there today, tomorrow, next week, right? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. So it's important to accept Jesus at this point. And if you don't have much faith, one of the disciples said, I don't have much faith. Could you give me faith? He asked Jesus to give him faith, right? And so you could even do that if you're an unbeliever. So, if you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's what St. John said. You need to take that first step. Confess it with your mouth and believe it in your heart. I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, that he was raised from the dead, that he died for my sins. Right? That's salvation right there. You say it with your mouth and you believe it in your heart, or try to believe it in your heart. At least you can fake it. Like, the song, the Van Halen song where he said, you could have at least faked it, boy. Faked it, boy. That's a lot of, I think when I get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of issues that I should have done right. And God's going to say, you could have at least faked it, boy. Faked it, boy. Fake it till you make it. Let's be real. It's hard, to be a Christian. It is not easy. You have this idealistic setup that you're supposed to strive for, but you really, unless you're like Father Martin, which he even had issues, it's going to be real hard to get to that, place. But we're supposed to strive, God will take us right where we're at,
That's right. And just to clarify, if anybody had heard the last episode that we did, that Garth and I did with Yes, part 2 of the Yes thing, he said, let's hold the mirror up to ourselves and see how we fare, basically, paraphrasing what he said. And it's the Christian life is, like you said, Johnny, the Christian life is really, honestly, it's impossible for us to live the way that God wants us to live. But if we are willing to step out in faith, he will make it possible for us to basically hobble along. He gives us the strength that we don't have, because without him, it is impossible to live the Christian life, because there's no way I'd last a day. I'd be back in my sinful patterns that that he's already pulled me out of. I'd be right back to him, but it's by his grace that he upholds me in that way. And
are you talking about cocaine and Mexican girls? Because those are mascots of the Iron Show.
How did you know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah!
Get out of my
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, 'cause St. Paul said, which kind of summarizes this whole thing that we've gone on to. St. Paul said, being confident of this very thing, that he that began a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. He's going to keep working you. He's going to keep helping you, and the biggest thing about God is his mercy to me. His mercy is his glory. God is rich in mercy. So if you've done something bad, you cry out to Jesus for mercy, cause God is rich in mercy. He is willing to pick you up and dust you off and over again. I mean, you look at the book of Judges. I mean, they would go back into, temple prostitutes and sacrifice and idol worship. And then God would like kind of lift his finger off of them, and their enemies would come in and totally, wipe them out almost, and they'd plead out to God, and God would send a judge to save them. And this happened over and over again, 13 times in the book of Judges, till the end. A 200-year period of this. They would fall every 20 years approximately, and finally at the end, the last time, what was the 13th time, God said, "You know what? I am tired of bailing you out. You keep going back. Call out to your idols to save you." And then it says, finally, the Lord could bear their pleas and cries and for no longer, and he bailed them out again.
And that's the difference too between the Christian. Once you're a Christian, once you're saved, you look at God and his mercy. But when you're outside of the Christian fold, you look at God and his judgment. You
do.
And that's really the difference. It's a perspectival thing.
I got to frame that one. Say that one again.
I don't know what I said.
You said when you're outside of the faith, you look at God and his judgment.
Right.
Say
and then once you're saved by his grace, you look at and focus on his mercy and his grace. That's what you see. You don't see the judgment anymore because it no longer applies to you. And it just changes the way that you live your entire life.
If you're outside of Christ, if you're outside of Jesus, judgment certainly does apply to you, and you will be judged. And you ain't going to be judged by me, because I'm not worthy to judge anybody. Everybody knows Johnny's the bad boy of the whole alt fringe Christian community. Everybody knows that. So I don't judge you. I don't care if you're a pink-haired, blue-haired lesbian. It doesn't bother me. I mean, but God will. God will work on you about that. God, that's not my. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that I'm just not. I'm not here to judge anybody. I don't care what you are. Especially I'm from Portland. So I mean, come on, I'm from Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine. I'm from Portland. So we don't judge anybody in Portland. So. Jesus, though, God will judge you if you're outside of Christ, if you're not a believer. God will certainly judge you when you die. Once you accept Christ, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, that God has raised him from the dead, confess it with your mouth. Once you're in Christ, then you're dealing with God's mercy because Jesus already was judged for you.
Right.
So the judgment,
and because God is perfect, he has to judge evil. He can't just let it all slide. And that's one of the things I think that people don't understand. They want justice, but they'll get that in God. One of the things that human beings long for. Look at all these Rush lyrics, like the Subdivision song. He's talking about being an outsider or an outcast, and it's like that's who we are outside of Christ. We're outcasts, we're outsiders. Jesus came here to save just those people, and the justice that people are looking for in life is only going to be found in Jesus, and it's not going to be found in all the other philosophies or worldviews or religions. And so what an appeal by, that's why I find Christianity so appealing. It answers all of my deepest longings. You know what I mean? I find it all there.
Yeah, the questions are all answered, and they're answered scientifically. even. I mean, you can be a really highly advanced intellectual scientist, and you can see the truth claims and all of the questions that are addressed and fulfilled in Christianity. You can see that it's a scientific thing. It's logical. It has all these answers, all these conditions it addresses, and all the answers and the justice. It's all very logical. It follows logical paths, whereas the other religions just don't. You'll have logical fallacies. You'll run into tons of them.
Yep, and that's Jesus stepping in the path, getting in your way, just like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you're a Rush, fan, then I think you're probably on that path. You're going to end up running into Jesus. He stands right there at the end of these logical paths.
Yep, totally. Well, hey, man, I'm probably going to have to jump off here. I appreciate you having me on the show.
I didn't say wait a minute. I didn't say you could go anywhere.
I know. You didn't have to.
What's up? You have been listening to Philosopher Rock. Been hanging out live with Brian Day, the first time ever, and I love Brian. I just, I haven't known you before today, and I'm just fast friends. I love you, man.
Yeah,
You're
totally.
Great. I love hanging out with you,
brother.
Dude, it's awesome.
I appreciate you having me on here, and we got to do this again sometime. And this whole live thing was fun, and I knew it would be a blast just working with you, and because I've heard you in the past over the years, listened to your show, and so I'm honored to be here today. I appreciate you having me on, and honored to have you as a brother in Christ too. So thank you.
It truly is an honor for you to know me. What's up? Oh, yeah! All right, you've been listening to Philosopher Rock. You can find all the archives of Philosopher Rock at likeflintradio.com. That's likeflintradio.com. Once again, that's likeflintradio.com, where you can find all the archives of the Philosopher Rock show with GK and Brian here. And you can also find the history of the King James Bible. Everything you ever wanted to know about how that thing was written, translated, is available there. Huge, deep study. Of course, going all the way back to the early days of podcasting in ancient times, back to 2008, 2009. You have Future Quake South Africa and Future Quake Southern Hemisphere, all available at likeflintradio.com. That's likeflintradio.com, and also available now on the Fringe Radio Network. That's fringeradionetwork.com. You've been listening to Philosopher Rock. I'm going to play you one of my original songs from 1987, written by me and Stephen Poor, drummer Stephen Poor. This is Two Armies, recorded in Frankenstein's Lab, Portland, Oregon, 1987. Good night, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.